Welcome to the season 2 of the India Energy Hour podcast. The India Energy Hour podcast explores the most pressing hurdles and promising opportunities of India's energy transition through an in depth discussion on policies, financial markets, social movements, and science. The podcast is hosted by energy transition researcher and author Dr. Sandeep Pai and senior energy and climate journalist Shreya Jai. The show is produced by multimedia journalist Tejas Dayananda Sagar.
As it has been happening for years now, coal and power crisis has gripped India yet again. Severe heat waves caused due to climate crisis, coupled with mismatch in coal demand and supply, led to a nationwide power crisis. Electricity distribution utilities are resorting to power cuts, Centre is pushing imported coal, and ministries of coal and railways are at loggerheads. To guide us through this maze of crisis, our host Dr. Sandeep Pai spoke with two journalists with their ears on the ground. Sarita C Singh, a seasoned energy journalist and an expert on fossil fuels and energy policies, along with our co-host Shreya Jai, senior energy and climate journalist.
Welcome, Sarita, to the India Energy Hour. It's a very important topic that we're going to discuss today. India is reeling with, heat waves, and it's in some places it's 49 degrees, and there has been a surge in power demand because of that. And like every year, this year also, it seems like there's an issue of power shortage, and people are facing issues of how to deal with that. And states, both the central government and the state government, are grappling with it. And I can't think of a better person to interview than you and our co-host Shreya, who has also been covering this topic. So I'm really excited. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on the show. I've been hearing the podcast and they're really wonderful. You're doing a very nice job.
That's very kind of you. I'm very happy to hear that, and that's a good way to start the questions, because some of these questions are quite like interesting and important in terms of like what's happening in India. So let's just start with the big picture here, right? Like, we hear about this power crisis, or sometimes called coal crisis, which I'm not sure is the right word. This is really, in my view, a power crisis. Like, what is the genesis of this coal/power crisis? And how long do you think this has been happening? You have been covering this topic forever. So, if you can walk us through the history and like why this happens, what's some of the key issues?
So, yes, as you said, this has been happening every year. We all know, I mean, we all go through this every year. Every year, this has been brief. So, I've been covering power for almost like 17 years now. So in the initial years, we used to face this 2006, 2007, I very clearly remember. We had a similar kind of coal shortage. But then that was coal shortage. After that, because maybe say the demand wasn't that much and all, so it started happening only during the October season when we do not have access to coal mines, the railway lines get affected, or all those things. And partly also in, say, the months of June and July. Last year was, I would say, an exception because the kind of capacity that was hit was unprecedented. I have never seen such large capacity under coal crunch. So it was almost like at one point of time, it was almost like 95% of the capacity was under stress. So that is the magnitude we're talking about today. Last year, as we saw, I mean, August, September, it was clearly a coal shortage because they said that the coal mines were shut, the railways was not able to evacuate the coal, and we were very clear it was coal shortage. The government then took certain measures. It said we need to stock coal, so they brought out new coal stocking norms. They said that things would improve. We would have around 47 million tons of coal ready before the summer sets in. So that was the target. Then, as the crisis eased, I think the seriousness also somewhere we lost that kind of seriousness within the government. So we started the financial year with very low coal stocks. That is one of the concerns of the government right now. The demand we have faced in April was 215 gigawatts. Every year we see like 10 megawatts addition to the peak demand. This year it was like every, if in April it was 180, 170, 180 every year, or maybe 2019 it was 180. It touched 207 peak met. I'm talking about. So the peak actual demand was around 215 gigawatts. So there we are, and undoubtedly we are in for very tough times ahead. That is the major concern of the government right now.
Shreya, I don't know if you want to add something to that. You've also been looking at this very closely for a long time now.
That's a great history because, good that she pointed out that when there was an actual shortage, and now when there is a demand and government has its own set of projections, right? We are talking about a time where the government is saying that we will have a double digit economic growth. That also entails that power demand will also grow by that much proportion. And it's not like the coal people or the coal industry does not know that kind of demand will come up, because as far as I understand, there was close to a projected demand of 750 million tons that the Ministry of Power had submitted, that this is the amount of coal we will need to meet the projected power demand that will go up. But clearly it was not planned that way. The rest of the supply chain was clearly not prepared for that kind of jump in the coal demand. And Sandeep, you would know this has been my long time complaint, that there is a shortfall in the long term forecasting of electricity sector in the country, for a sector that has so much data, that has such a complex web of supply chain and so many different ministries for everything. There is not a consolidated demand projection, long term, medium term, short term, when you know which month you will face the problem, when you know which month the mine would be shut. And you cannot blame just one part of the supply chain. If Coal India is saying that you should keep some coal with yourself before this crisis months start, no one does that. Then the Coal India is not paid also. Then power distribution companies don't pay the Gencos. So no one is like sitting together and deciding ki, okay, let's sit, sort it out together. And it is more weird to happen now when there are no more silos like it used to be in the previous governments. And so then also there is no level headedness. It's kind of weird that it continues to happen. This my observation, my complaint rather.
That's great. I mean, I think you partly kind of started touch upon the question that I wanted to ask next. Is that, since this is happening for so long and, so many different ministries are kind of connected and like working on it, like, why are there no lessons learned? On top of that, I think this year in particular, correct me if I'm wrong, like, there's been some extraordinary measures and something that Sarita has been tweeting, and that tweet went viral. In fact, I want to go ahead and now read that tweet because I have that tweet. Wait, what? Government just told imported coal-based power business, you must operate and sell electricity under tie-ups in brackets called PPA or in power exchanges. Banana Republic question. Will it work? I spent a day figuring out 5 Ws and 1 H. What, when, who, where, why, sharing my days learning. And my favorite in that is, however, in this context, there was a long series of tweets, but one of the tweets said, like, however, at 140-ton imported coal and current tariffs, viability is out of questions. After several meetings, as states did not agree to buy this power and developers citing various challenges, Power Ministry decided to say what my mother said in quotes, खाना है खाओ नहीं तो हमको खाने दो. I mean, this is just, I think this year is just extraordinary with all these Section 11 and like, all the different kind of like mandates that are coming. So I don't know, like, Sarita, if you want to like take us through of why there are no lessons learned? Like, why is there always like a knee-jerk reaction to this?
Sandeep, my answer to that would be it's so difficult to address everything, because there are, as Shreya pointed out, there are problems at every corner. I mean, like distribution companies is a different set of problems, generation companies is a different set of problems. It's also a problem that we have capacity glut. So we're not able to manage. There were stressed assets. Coal is completely out of, I mean, no sync. Railways again is a different set of problems. So addressing all of this together really needs a different level of planning and maybe complete change in the way we decide. Railways doesn't know how many rakes are required is really worrisome. Coal says that power guys were not lifting the coal, so we are not producing. There was a time they were not taking out coal. They were just removing the overburden. They were not producing coal because they said the power people are not picking up coal. So there are so many problems at different levels, and addressing everything at one go is just not possible. It requires people. I think Shreya said that this government doesn't work in silos. Yes, of course, but then I don't see that kind of bonding also in the various government departments. That's also missing. I mean, if they're not working in silos, but there are the policies and the planning required is not up to mark, I would say. So it requires maybe say short term, medium term, and long term planning. And right now we need to, of course, address short term things, but there has to be a medium term planning also and a long term goal also, where and how exactly we're going to reach to that goal is also we need to sit down and figure out. What happens is whenever there is a crisis, there are knee jerk reactions, and there are section 107s invoked, section 11 invoked. All of this happens, and the moment the crisis goes off, everything goes off and people stop. It's life as usual again. So we need more seriousness and more long term kind of planning.
And if I may add here, when we are setting targets, by we I mean when the government is setting targets, suddenly everyone is together. When we are announcing 500 gigawatt of renewable, you will see everyone saying, yes, yes, we will have 500 gigawatt of renewable. When one guy says that, we will not import any coal, everyone decided, let's not import coal. So NTPC was literally asked not to import coal. And that led to a crisis because that particular pressure falls on the domestic supply. Is your domestic supply ready that the imported coal capacity, that pressure is not there? I remember when I was a cub journalist learning the ropes with Sarita, I used to say, Dekhna, one day renewable will come and all this coal problem will be solved. Sarita would be writing out coal crisis. I said, renewables will come and solve everything. And here I am, worried, as worried renewable people are, because they're not getting paid. No one is buying their power and they are not contributing anything, something that we will discuss. So, when it comes to targets, everyone is together. But when it comes to solutions, now they're all sitting quietly. What about those tall claims about no imported coal and, renewable contributing that much to the electricity economy? It's not happening. So it feels very, it kind of disorients you, that 2 years back this was a situation, 2 years back this is now. So it is like that.
Speaking of, like a knee-jerk reaction, just in the vein of what we are talking, I recently followed that yesterday or like a few days back, government has mandated states and gencos that they have to now, they must import coal. Like how feasible that is. It's such an overheated market internationally. Like, why would anybody import and then sell that power? Like, is it not also kind of sowing the seed of like a state center, Genco center, state Genco war along those lines? Like, will such mandates actually work?
No, it's very difficult. I was speaking to people and they said, even if they're willing to pay, there is no coal available right now. In fact, the government has asked those companies which have been mandated under Section 11 to buy from high seas, which is even costlier. So, and these distribution companies which have to pay for this power, they're not willing really. So, today, what has happened is the government has invoked Section 107 again, asking CERC to mandate, I mean, to kind of enable these generating companies to go ahead and blend 30% of coal, not 10%, 30% of coal till March next year. And they would not need distribution companies' consent for this. So I see a lot of litigations happening with this kind of invoking of Section 107 too often. Section 11 again is already in question. Tata Power has already moved to CERC. A lot of others are not very happy. So, of course, it's not going to be easy, but I see this as a very desperate move. This is what the central government can do right now, as I understand. Of course, Sandeep, I have also seen other countries like, for example, say Germany and all of these other countries, they are also facing such problems, but they have not been taking such kind of measures. What they in fact do is maybe demand supply management, and time of day tariff is something that we have been talking about since long. But nothing of that sort happens. Again, there is lack of planning. So right now, if you ask me how feasible it is to implement these section 107s and section 11, it's going to be very difficult for the government, because the generation companies are not in sync, distribution companies are not in sync, and regulators, of course, are not in sync. So it's just the central government that is issuing orders and working on them. So we need to see how much of it is actually getting implemented on ground.
Shreya, do you want to chime in on that?
I guess, in the long term, I think a vibrant electricity market would help, but that is not being planned because the government then feared that there would be a lot of profit making. That kind of allegation flew last when the last crisis happened between August and September, because prices in the power exchanges, which is the spot power market, went up to the roof. And that's because there was desperate buying, not as much as selling, but desperate buying. And market functions like that. But then the government is saying that some people are trying to do profit making. They might be, obviously, there are some captive players who take advantage of the situation. That's how power exchanges function. But then if you are thinking to having a vibrant market which kicks in into these situations, when there is ancillary power available, when there is a spot power available, that's how you manage these demand parks. And we might want to discuss gas here.
Yeah, I think that kind of was my next question. I was kind of going towards other sources, but I thought first we'll discuss like coal. So now that you have brought it in, let's talk about both renewables and gas, right? Like there's always it, and this is not an India story. This is always a global story. Whenever there is a power shortage, a power crisis, or energy crisis, as what's happening in Europe, like you always have one group of people, activists, stakeholders, who say let's do more renewables, or let's do more hydro, or let's do other sources, non-coal sources. And then you have this other group who really believes that, like, we need more coal, we need more firm power, maybe nuclear, etc., etc. So in this, I think there's also a sense of like this kind of similar thing playing out. Like, so what I want to understand, and taking Shreya's question forward, is like, did gas or renewables play any role in this crisis in helping, or they were absent, or they were just irrelevant? And like, what's the long-term outlook on this? Like, should India now stop building more coal plants, just rely on gas as well as renewables, or coal has to play a role? And so I know I asked a bunch of different questions, but what I'm trying to get at is what is the role of different sources, renewables and gas, and what should be their long term outlook?
So, yes, I think I'll start with Shreya's question first. On gas. So yes, I've been. I feel it upsets me, having 24,000 megawatts of gas-based capacity and not being able to use any of it. It should actually be upsetting everyone, each one of us. That was complete failure on part of our policymakers and also the companies. So whenever, I guess, if you plan something, you would also have a plan B. For gas based projects, there was no plan B. I mean, if you are putting up such large investments, there was no plan B for them, and it's so unfortunate for all of us. And so, in this crisis, gas did not play any role. The projects were completely shut. Every year, generally, when such high demand is there and coal is absent, gas plays a part. but that's because the prices internationally are low. So this time, that was one upsetting thing. Gas prices were so high, the cost was working out to be at around 20 rupees per unit. So the government and everyone decided, no, this is not going to work out. And then the cap came in, the CERC price cap at 12 rupees, which was completely out of question for gas-based projects to operate. So gas was not there, solar was there, but wind was absent. So wind started coming in only in the first week of May. May 3rd, if I'm not wrong, we started getting wind from Tamil Nadu and Gujarat. Since then, things have been fine. And that is how you would see people not really talking about power shortages. You would not see headlines in the papers that there is shortage. So for that much, I mean, now we are taking it easy for these many days. The worry now for the government is the monsoon period. Coal stocks is really worrying them. Hydro, unfortunately, we are stagnant in hydro. We're not building much in hydro. We have so much potential. We're not doing much in hydro. Hydro again started coming in from last week of March, but since the capacity is limited, and it's also less than renewables right now, so that is where the limiting thing is there for hydro.
Wanted to share an observation, and probably Sarita can elaborate because I think she would know about this better. There were programs to revive gas, that particular subsidy scheme for that, where you can get imported gas at a subsidized rate. Government was ensuring that there was a tender. I'm so sorry. But I've seen the amount under that particular scheme going down every year in the budget. I'm not sure, but this year I don't think there is any amount allocated for that particular scheme. So if you can elaborate, are we saying like goodbye to gas now, given up all hope altogether? And do you think, or you must have got to know, is there any plan? As you mentioned that there was never a plan B, but do you think a plan B kind of thing coming up?
See, for gas, I have been checking with the government. Yes, there was this scheme which worked on well for some time, almost like 2 years. It worked on well, but later it was withdrawn, saying how long can we be supporting gas-based projects like that? So within the policy makers, among the policy makers, they were uncomfortable that they are supporting gas-based projects on subsidy, and how long can it be done? So they decided to withdraw, and that was the time when gas prices actually went down and they were at record lows around 2 years back. So nobody bothered about gas. They have been on and off talking about using gas based capacity for peak load. But then there is again no policy till now. It has been under works. As I said, whenever there's a crisis, we remember gas and we remember all the stressed assets. But otherwise, we very easily tend to forget that yes, we have gas based capacity. So, gas is almost, in the immediate future, I don't see any major role being played by gas based capacity. The problem is also that most of these projects are not operating right now. So, one fine day, if you decide that I need gas based project, you would also have to ensure that they are in that size and shape, they are maintained well, so that they can start operating whenever you want. So they're not, and most of them are already going into liquidation and NCLT.
That's good. I think we talked a little bit about gas. I think I'll start with Shreya this time. Like, could you elaborate a bit on like the role of renewables? Like, how in this current crisis and in the future crisis could renewables play a role? I know that you track renewables very closely. So, how can renewables play a role in like averting such crises in the future?
I feel very sad in informing you that in the near future, I don't see renewable playing a role in averting a crisis or playing an active role in avoiding such a crisis. One major reason being that renewable solar and wind, when I say renewable, just solar and wind, not hydro. Solar and wind cannot act as bridge fuel like gas can. And as Satya said, gas is a lost case now. Hydro, there is no investment happening. There are small hydro projects, but they are very regionally, locally located, and not a big scale investment is planned in that. Solar and wind, again, the same challenges which they face in every geographical area is that they are seasonal. It's a very finicky type of energy source. And as you can see from the data, there's not much investment into energy storage, that you store renewables in their season and use it later in the crisis season. Ideally, it would make sense to invest a lot into storage rather than into nuclear, or for that matter even hydro, and invest in battery storage. So it is sad in that way. Second part, which is very very depressing, is that RE is being used as what I like to call the first bakra in a crisis like this. So if I am a distribution company in a state, whose payment do I stop the first when a crisis like this emerges? It's RE. You go and check the dues that are pending to renewable projects, and they are shooting up. Since March, when the crisis started, it's shooting up. There was a brief period when there was a relief in states like Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra because of wind started coming up. But now these wind power producers are saying that their wind power is being curtailed. Why? Because, there's a rule that renewable energy cannot be curtailed. It's a must run status. So if you curtail them, you don't have to pay them. There would be charges later, but right now you don't have to pay them. So they are the first calamity. Anywhere anyone decides to cancel their projects, then you curtail them, and then whenever a crisis emerges, you just stop their payment, and hurt their revenues, and then the same cycle starts. Those companies and projects do not make profit. They go to the market for selling, and the whole vicious cycle of renewables not being viable coming up. What the government or the policymakers are supposed to do is to make them more viable by investing in, say, storage, or planning in their forecasting better, or managing them better, or the grid operator playing a more active role in ensuring that the renewable is fed into the grid. So it's a very sad story for renewables.
So that's a really interesting point, and something that always comes up. So thinking about your point about like how discoms are willing to pay a fine, if I can call it a fine later, so that they don't have to pay to the renewables now. Is that a correct understanding? And if that is the case, like, how do we, like, I mean, this always boils down to the question of discoms, right? How do we work with the discoms? How much is the role of discoms in all this? And like, how do we revive the cycle so that discoms are able to make these payments? I know it's a big question, but I'd be curious to hear if you have any quick thoughts on that. I'll start with Sarita.
That is one question we have been trying to answer for the last 2 decades.
I'm glad I'm the one questioning here, not the
Still
one answering
struggling
or
to find
trying to.
answers to that. uh, no, here I would really want to point out one observation I've been making. So, what is the role of state regulatory commissions? Yes, we know for a fact that distribution companies are in a bad shape. Most of it comes from the politics, free power to farmers, all of this. Every time there is an election, we have all these promises. So, yes, we know that distribution companies are cash trapped. It's a problem we have been facing. We have had so many rounds of restructuring programs. We have a new scheme which is getting implemented, but then hopes somewhere are low because we have been seeing this for so long. So we have certain doubts whether this would get implemented in the way we want. Here, what I wanted to point out was the role of state regulatory commissions. What is the role of a regulatory commission? It has to ensure that power is tied up. The distribution licensee has tied up adequately and is in a position to supply power 24 by 7. There, because these regulatory commissions are appointed by the states, that of course they can't question the states, so that doesn't happen. Distribution companies are not allowed to raise their tariffs. They're not allowed proper adequate tariffs to cover their costs. So then there are losses. To fund these losses, they again take loans. So we have accumulated debt of 5 lakh crores. So this is a spiral thing that keeps on going on and on and on, and we have all seen how it affects the entire power sector. So the generating companies, because they don't get cash, they are in trouble. Then because they don't get cash, they don't pay the coal companies get into trouble. So this has been going on for so long, but there is no fix, there is no solution to this. The reason why I pointed out regulatory commissions is, more than anything, we need that discipline, we need that kind of awareness in the distribution companies that this is not going to work, and this can't happen. That can come only when the regulators are independent. The distribution companies have heads, have people who stay for a longer period of time. Probably they face the public hierarchy. You were here at that policy when that policy was made, so you are responsible. So there is no responsibility fixing among the states, and there is no awareness also. And also the fact that RK Singh, when he joined as the power minister, the first question he when I met him and he asked me was, you're a power consumer, do you know of any other power consumer in any other country who would face, say, a 2-hour power cut and not question? How do you people not question your distribution utilities when you face power cuts? So all of this, I think all of this impacts the quality of supply, and all of this is responsible for the kind of situation we are in right now.
I think I agree. I mean, one has to question the distribution company, but I think in this fog of who is responsible, nobody really knows. Like in newspapers, if you read newspapers for most years, it'll seem that it's the coal companies, like they're not producing. So it's really, I think as a consumer, it's a bit hard to know who should I blame. Do I blame these, guys who are supplying my power, or do I blame somebody else? So it kind of gets lost in that. But it's a complex question. I don't know, Shreya, if you have any thoughts to add, or come on, once at least disagree with each other. Or, this is me going very well.
I cannot. She's just too good. How can I disagree? I've learned reading her. What are you saying? Anyway, I think the point that you mentioned about consumer not questioning, I think it also comes from a fact is that if I question the company that's supplying me electricity, who do I go back to? It's like the same thing that goes on in this country. Ki option kya hai? So when there are more players in the market, then you can question them. If it's a private player, people will go out and question them. I will not name the player, or maybe I can name the player. Last year was it, when there was a change of ownership in the distribution company in Mumbai. It went from the hands of Reliance to Adani, and because of COVID, the meters could not be read by all the employees, so they sent an average bill, and they were pretty shot up, and everyone took to Twitter. Also because it's Mumbai, so from celebrities to no, common people, everyone took to Twitter. Not that they were wrong in doing so, but everyone took to Twitter. Are you seeing people taking to Twitter? I see only people complaining about BSES here. Most of these distribution companies won't even have a Twitter handle, for that matter. So when a consumer is complaining, you will see mostly against a private distribution companies. And I've just share another observation. Kesco, which is the Kanpur electricity supply company, one of the profit making electricity supply company, it has a Twitter handle, and you should see amazing tweets on that Twitter handle. People complain and nonchalantly they write 4 hours, the supply will come in 4 hours or 3 hours. They will write some technical words which I also don't understand. No one would understand except engineer. It's like an engineer typing there. He will mention the line and what kind of outage it is, and things like that, which a consumer won't know. And they will just mention randomly 4 hours, 5 hours, and this has happened, that has happened. So it is difficult for Indian electricity consumers to question the electricity suppliers. Privatization is considered an anathema. We can establish that fact. However much we can talk about privatization, it just doesn't happen. So yeah, until unless you have a vibrant market where there are more players, I as a consumer can question and actually warn them, put them in a spot and say ki bye bye, I'm going to company Y now. which up to an extent happens in Mumbai. It happens for large consumers, but large consumers have that option. They all shift in a group. That happened, that kind of exodus happened in Mumbai and keeps happening. So you have to have that market. And one reason is that, you know, people do not, and also a large section of the consumer is getting free or subsidized electricity. ठीक है, we are getting for 8 hours, but at least it's for free. So that's also, and again, it comes back to what she said. It's a political tool. Regulatory commissions, appointees are political tool. Tariffs are political tools. Everything is a political tool. It should be a economic subject. You know, it should be treated like an economic subject rather it's treated like a socialist subject, I would say.
And we tried doing this. I mean, the Electricity Act Amendment Bill is pending for so long in Parliament. Why? Because it says that there has to be competition within the distribution companies. And states have been opposing it. They're saying it's not possible. We can't be doing that. So, yeah, there we are.
That's great. And, so let's talk a little bit, zoom out and talk a little bit about the big picture. So, there's power shortage that happens year on year. And we can see the whole mess. It's like an octopus with so many legs, right? Like, there's the coal companies, the discoms, like each has its own issues that we broadly touched upon. On top of that, there's the whole issue of climate change and not using fossil fuels as much as possible. And in India's case, that really means coal. How does that climate question complicate or tangle this question of energy security and reliable power for a country like India? Like, I mean, I really want you guys to speculate and share your thoughts about what's the way forward. Should India like stop relying on coal? Like, I mean, it's one thing to go and say phase down coal and all that, but like, what in practice should India stop using coal plants and like really promote renewables with storage, which it's doing? I mean, not sure about storage, but at least renewables. Like, what's the way forward from all this, and how does climate change complicate this already very complex situation with so many legs?
So, yes, I think both of us have been following this after COP26 commitments. What is the situation? So, this 500 gigawatts, we are targeting 500 gigawatts by 2030, and nobody clearly has a clue how we are going to reach there. So, in terms of renewable, in terms of planning, we are lagging behind. We don't have that much time, and so renewables, I don't think it's really, the planning is really going on well. But recently, the power minister made a statement that all renewable bids are going to be with storage from now on. So finally, there is some kind of focus on storage. Now they have started feeling that this whole hybrid kind of model and everything is, of course, it's working, but then storage is something we really need to start focusing on. So that's there. Coal phasing out, there have been reports and reports, there have been suggestions. Again, one ministry says we should be phasing out, one says we should be putting an end to coal, but that clearly is not happening to my mind. I think Shreya is the one who's tracking renewables so closely and the environment so closely. She would be able to give a better picture. But in terms of coal, I don't think phasing down happening so soon. However, I recently got to know about the targets they have fixed for 2030. So their plan is 500 gigawatts of renewables, around 80 gigawatts of storage, and 250 gigawatts of coal. We're already at 210. The under construction capacity is around 50. So we are actually not building any new capacity in the next at least 7 years. In fact, we are phasing down some 10 gigawatts. So that is for the next, I mean, till 2030. But beyond that, also, even though we are not building any fresh projects, but I don't see phasing down happening because renewables, as we are seeing, it's not so intermittent. States have so much dislike for these renewable projects right now. A lot of questions remain unanswered. So renewables clearly is not the dependable source for us. at least right now. I think Shreya can elaborate much on this.
Shreya, I think we have discussed this question quite a bit, but
Too much responsibility on me.
it almost feels like this is a question of India Energy Hour. What to do about coal? But anyway, I will let you answer.
This is the theme of this podcast, and we have not found any answers yet. That should say a lot about it. But yeah, I don't see coal going away. You talk to all these people in UK or US or who are involved in COP, especially people who saw Alok Sharma crying because India did not say we will phase out coal. And you tell them that for another 20 years, coal is here to stay. And then you see another set of people crying. But jokes apart, I don't see that India can get away with coal. And I, for one, is very happy that we have set a very long date for retiring coal. The reason being, we have no plan of how to retire coal. And if we do not have a plan of how to retire coal, then we would see a catastrophe unfolding in at least 5 states. 3 states specifically. Sandeep, you would know. You've gone there to study this particular thing. So we have not planned anything that if this mine shuts, what happened to that particular town? If this mine shuts, what happened to the jobs? What happened to the economy in these states? If these mines shut, what will we do on that land? Some of these mines that are being shut are turned into eco parks. I don't know, go there and have picnic or jobi. So there is no plan for retiring coal on how to do that. And if you're retiring a particular capacity, first of all, a number has not been decided as of yet. Ki how much by when, every year of how much. There is something which she mentioned, that there is no new capacity being planned. But what would you do with the current capacity? There is no plan for that. So thank God we have a net zero target of 2070. At least we won't be there to answer this question anymore. Also, the people who set this particular target. Another worrying fact is that there is so much of noise around renewables. Everyone is talking about what ambitious target India has set up, and it makes you so happy and elated that India is finally being talked on the global stage because of our target. But then if you dig deeper, the answers are very, very troubling. Whatever investment, or if I may say foreign investment, that is coming in is very company specific. So what will happen in another 2-3 years is that we'll see a consolidation. We'll see just big five governing the whole renewable space, and kind of it has happened. The smaller players which made headlines because they were bidding so low for solar and wind, I do not see them anymore. Everyone is selling out and going away. Because why? Because no one is giving you money. One Andhra Pradesh decides to cancel all renewable energy projects. 4 months you're not paid. So who will put money in that? There is no return. Every investor you talk with is not confident of the returns that a renewable energy company is promising. Companies which are getting listed on foreign exchanges, even they are being questioned now, because the kind of double digit return that they were promised is something that the investors are not sure of whether they will see in the near term or in the medium term. So it's a problematic situation, and as I said earlier, there are no efforts being made to make renewable more viable. There should be more efforts made to make it more viable and take this particular foreign investment beyond companies. There is something being planned on one sun, one world, one grid, where you will have one transnational grid supplying electricity from here and there, and some of the biggest international agencies are involved in that. But then what is infrastructure being planned? Is it talking about the real time challenges? Are we talking to the states? And as Sarita mentioned, states are still not willing for renewable. It's like just another renewable energy. And you'd remember this renewable power obligation, RPO. It used to be my favorite topic to write on. Every year, every state will miss it, barring one or two. Why? Because no one cares, and also there is no penalty attached to it. So why buy renewable? Why waste my money? And this, now it is much more worse, is because renewable is cheaper and still no one is buying. So I think efforts are now being, rather than going into 500 megawatts or gigawatts and 450 gigawatts and all that, I think we should now talk about real plans. like real plans, that this is the battery storage that I'm doing, this is the amount of manufacturing. At the end of the day, who cares if your panel is coming from China? Obviously there's a lot of foreign exchange involved. It will shift. There's another chain of thought that all your foreign exchange from oil will shift to solar. That's still a long shot, but still, you need to have a plan in place, which I like to say that for every megawatt there has to be a plan. And I really want someone to answer that 500 gigawatt, where is the land? Where is the land to put a 500 gigawatt? And Sandeep knows this. It has been my long time complaint, which I ask every guest renewable expert that I ask, is that why are we not investing in decentralized solar, which we should. So that's why I say that every megawatt that we are investing in, there should be a plan for every megawatt.
That's great. I love that you end with this is a very big answer with a lot of thoughts, going international and then coming local.
Sorry, it's a very touchy issue for me. Sorry if I like.
No, it's perfect. But you made a very good point in the end. I mean, you made all very good points, but you talked about like decentralized, systems. So circling back to our like the topic of discussion, even in the context of climate change, I mean, do you think seeing power crisis after crisis year on year, shouldn't India be more aggressive on decentralized systems? So where when large systems fail, there's this whole issue with coal and discoms and power, and so at least you can, for those 4 hours or 10 hours of power cuts, you can run your decentralized systems. I mean, that's one thing I always think about, that why is there not a backup decent, like, I mean, not only that it should be a backup, it should be like an integrated part of the system, but at least if we have reconciled to the fact that every year we'll see a crisis for these months, why can't we have a decentralized backup for those months? I don't know if that question resonates with you or the sentiment behind that question, but I would love to hear both your thoughts. Let's start with Sarita again.
No, of course, of course. See, yes, as a country, we're so obsessed with numbers. Largest tender, 500 gigawatts, no one has ever done it, but ultimately, no roadmap. If we start small, or maybe we start at the localized levels. See, for example, these days I see a lot of companies getting into, these decentralized kind of things. So their data centers are solar powered. So they would have a lot of other renewable energy backups. So why didn't we start at that scale? Is all I always wonder. I mean, that is maybe the way when we start something, we start with a small, we take baby steps, and then we talk about giant leaps. But here we first talk about the quantum, we talk about the scale. Of course, yes, we were talking about economies of scale, but then for that we need plans. We need to sit down, chalk down plans, roadmaps, and in the meantime, we can ask these companies, these at least the MNCs, solarize your food chains, your cold chains, something like that. So that's of course even that of course resonates. That really is something which I also keep wondering. Why don't we look at decentralized distribution? That could be one of the answers for a lot of problems. In fact, in the rural areas as well. So we're missing that thing, I guess, somewhere.
Shreya, circling back to your question, back at you.
Another touchy issue, but I will just very quickly sum it up. In addition to decentralize that you mentioned, and what Sarita said, that we can ask industry to also pitch in. I think energy efficiency, there were small programs by Bureau of Energy Efficiency where you get incentives for being energy efficient. I think it should be done at a large scale, where you get incentives for being green. ESG is becoming a big phenomena, and a lot of companies are like now have to invest in green. I do not support what Elon Musk says, but you have to be in green because no one will give money to you. So at the end of the day, sooner or later, this is going to happen, that people will not invest in you because you have exposure to fossil fuel in some sort of way. So the policy maker should also now ride this ESG wave. ESG should be part of policy making now, so that the corporates who come to, function here in this country know that this is the law of the land. That makes a lot of things easier. It reduces a lot of pressure on the energy ecosystem if your biggest consumers become energy efficient or adopt their own green energy targets and everything. And there are good examples across the country. There are a lot of examples in Gujarat, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, even Tamil Nadu, where industrial clusters have shifted to renewable energy, captive renewables. So I think if policymakers and industry kind of like work together on this, I think there's a way out there. There, a hopeful note for you.
Yeah, on the hopeful note, I think we had really good discussion. Let's talk about a few solutions. And I think throughout the conversation you touched about it. Like, how do we ensure that this crisis doesn't happen next year? In next April, how if Sarita, if I have to ask you three steps that government can take, and you can think about it, like, it's a pointed question. So, three steps that government can take to prevent a similar crisis. I hope that we don't have to do this episode and invite you back again next year to talk about the same issue. So, what could be like a few, three or four steps that government could take?
So, Sandeep, there are long-term measures we need to take. We all know that. And distribution companies setting them right, discipline in the distribution companies, all of that. But I think if we can prevent this crisis happening, so every year, so if you see the pattern, it's first coal logistics problem, then it shifts to the coal crisis from transportation of coal to actual availability of coal. So if we plan, if there is discipline among even the power generators, they need to stock the coal well in advance. They can't say no to coal. They can't be saying that we're not going to lift coal since there is no demand. So they need to ensure stock availability. Coal companies, of course, need to ramp up, keep their targets and their production at the same level. I mean, not at the same level, but at least at par with the consumption and the stock levels, and transportation. So, if these three things in the shorter term are addressed, I think we would not need that kind of imported coal we're talking about, and the kind of knee-jerk reactions we are taking right now. So I think planning, proper planning, if I can sum it up, that, and not within departments, across departments. If the power ministry is saying that we need this much coal, the coal ministry also has to sit down and talk how the coal is and from where the coal is going to come from, and the railway ministry has to ensure that it is supplied to the locations. So I think it's more about planning. The other issues, of course, they're there, but if these things are taken care of, I think we can avoid the situation next year.
Shreya, your 3 points?
I think my 3 points would be the same ones that she said. I'm agreeing with her again. If I have to add something in the long term planning, I think it would be something that you asked about having a bridge fuel, right? Bridge fuel, bridge arrangements, like we discussed, having decentralized systems, bridge fuels. I think a preparedness that if a crisis happens, what do you do? And I don't think planning at national level would help. I think every state should have this kind of system in place, which boils down to the fact that a state should have an efficient power systems. That's when you can plan such things. So I think that will also save us from this kind of crisis.
Thank you so much, Sarita. It's such a treat to talk to you about these issues, and I hope that you will continue to tweet and write your threads so that me and the listeners and others can learn. It's truly I truly appreciate your time on this. Thank you.
No, pleasure was all mine. I was really looking forward to, because it's been time. Me and Shreya had a word, and of course, I wanted to meet you guys. So, and I've been listening to this podcast so often, so I was like, wow, I want to be part of this. So,
No, thank you so much for joining. It's personally a very overwhelming moment for me to share the screen with you. No, it really is. It really is. It takes me 10 years back when, I would sit opposite to you and ask stupidest of the questions, and she would have this very calm demeanor with which she would answer even to the smallest of questions. So I'm not wrong when I say that I learned the ropes from her. And the way she used to write, she has a very calm demeanor. So I thought this power sector is very easy, and I actually landed in it. So, yeah, but so it's like it's a very personal achievement, and I'm very, very thankful for you to come. And our meeting is pending.
So sweet.
Thank you for listening to the India Energy Hour. Subscribe to this channel to never miss an update. To drop us a feedback, visit our website or write to us at theindiaenergyhour@gmail.com. We are on Twitter. You can follow at TIEH_podcast and get in touch with the two hosts at Shreya_Jai and at Sandeep Pai with double I.